October Owl Taking Flight webinar. We are very happy that you're here. I am not joined by Thea Racelis today. Thea had some things that got in the way of her participating today. And so I'm happy to be joined by Marshall Miller, who will introduce himself in a minute. I am the Unitarian Universalist Association's Our Whole Lives Program Manager. You normally see Amy Johnson, who manages the Our Whole Lives program for the United Church of Christ. Amy is on a very well-deserved sabbatical. Marshall, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, so I'm Marshall Miller. I'm filling in. I'm an Our Whole Lives trainer. I'm also one of the co-authors, along with my partner, Dorian Solot, of the forthcoming second edition of the kindergarten and first grade curriculum. And Dorian and I are also the co-creators of an OWL video series for parents and caregivers of young children that hopefully will be released sometime soon, hopefully in the next month or two.
Yeah, that we're very excited that, and Marshall and Dorian also curated resources that we're going to be linking to later on for kindergarten through sixth graders. Also joining us is Andrea Burse from the UCC. Andrea is handling our tech today, so if you have any questions, you can reach Andrea through the chat. We have a Q&A box. Please reserve questions for the Q&A box and the chat for saying hello, other kinds of communications with each other, but the Q&A is where we'll be looking for questions that we can answer for you. So today we are giving you a sneak peek at something that we have been working on for a year, which is online training. Marshall was one of our online trainers for a field test this August. We did two cohorts, one on Pacific time and one on Eastern time. And you may recall that Amy and I also did a test in the spring. And what happened as a result of the springtime test is that we realized the balance of sort of asynchronous, which is things people do on their own, and synchronous material was a little wonky. So we made some changes, and Thea Racelis and Hudson Nurmador and Marshall and I and Amy led two trainings in August with the new material. And we're now changing it a little bit again, and in preparation for getting started officially in January. So we are here to tell you about some of the successes, some of the challenges, some of the differences between the online training and the in-person training. And I will tell you right off the bat that we are going to be limiting the online trainings to UU and UCC participants. I'm sorry to disappoint anyone who is with a private school or other organization, but we really feel compelled to address the backlog that happened due to the lockdown and the lack of in-person trainings. I also want to say that we are only offering in-person trainings for grades 7 to 9 and 10, 12, the combined levels. We do hope to offer elementary. Amy and Marshall will be designing the elementary online training. So online and adult, we're hoping to get going late next summer. Now, just so you know, there are in-person trainings happening right now. They started in the summer. They are limited due to, health circumstances across the country, but they are happening. And you can look at our OWL facilitator calendar and look at that. Their UCC and the UUA both maintain calendars of in-person trainings. We will be adding the dates for the online trainings once Amy gets back. Well, we'll open registration once Amy gets back from sabbatical in early November. I want to share with you a slide so that you can see. This is when the dates will be for the upcoming, the first set of trainings. We have 2 in January. I know we have 1 in March. The dates will be the same for both cohorts. We're going to have 1 cohort for the East Coast and 1 for the West Coast, but they will all start at 6 p.m. on the appropriate time. and end at 8:30 p.m. You'll note that the time is 6 to 8:30 p.m. Mondays and Thursdays for 3 weeks. It starts the second week of the month, plus a Saturday from 10 to 3. Just keep that in mind. We'll show this, we'll be linking in the chat those dates. Even though the registration isn't open yet, you can start talking with the people in your congregation to see if those dates will work for you or for them. And we'll talk a little bit more about attendance later on, but these are the dates. You can pull them out of the chat also.
Great.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about if you or someone in your congregation were to sign up for those dates, what you'd be getting into. And as Melanie said, we've been working to field test this, and we're feeling pretty good about it, as good as anyone can feel after doing several field tests and getting a lot of feedback from participants, and really thinking through, well, what's the best format in terms of online learning and conveying this information. So the online format of the training uses several different methods to engage people. As Melanie mentioned, there's an asynchronous component. By that we mean something that people can do on their own time. And that's hosted through a website called the UU Institute. And they host courses on all different topics, and Our Whole Lives is one of them. And that's a combination of reading and videos to watch, opportunities for online discussion boards where participants can interact with each other, much in the same way message boards or comments work in other websites and online formats. And then also an opportunity, particularly after participants have watched a video or engaged with material in some way, to email their thoughts to trainers. Then there's the synchronous piece, and that's the Zoom. Those are the dates that Melanie just showed you in terms of everybody being able to be there together. And that is a combination. We use Zoom meetings. So it's a little bit different as any of you, all of you who've used Zoom know in terms of being able to see each other. We break people up into smaller groups, into breakout rooms for smaller group discussion. We also use several add-ons where participants can be present in the meeting, but also being able to write and share information in other ways. And we just wanted to give you a sample of one of those. One is called Jamboard, which some of you may be familiar with. It's used by Google much in the same way Google offers free products like Google Sheets or Google Docs. I'm going to put a link to a Jamboard in the chat. So if you go to that, if you click on that link, which I'm going to do right now, you have the opportunity to answer the question, what is your favorite Halloween candy? And just to make this more interesting and to see if there are regional differences, you can also tell us where you're zooming in from. So I'll just reveal mine, which is peanut M&Ms. I love it when the kids bring home candy, peanut M&Ms. We negotiate as parents. Could we take that from your Halloween stash? And then you can also say where you're zooming in from. I live in Albany, New York, but am in Columbus, Ohio at the moment, where I've been teaching some sex education programs to college students.
And I'm the Snickers in Boonton, New Jersey. I can't pass up a Snickers.
So you'll notice with Jamboard that as you first put your sticky note down, it will pop up in the upper left-hand corner, which may be on top of other people's. So feel free to just grab it and move it. If you have not yet found the sticky note, it is directly to the left of where I wrote the note to use a sticky note to tell us. So you'll see underneath the arrow, a little thing that looks like a sticky note, and you can click on that and write. And I'm seeing those coming in, loving both the geographic and diversity. I see some other peanut M&Ms fans. Reese's peanut butter cups, super popular. Candy corn, always great when, for some reason I never see candy corn any other time of year, but it makes its way out during Halloween. Very fun, those of you who have figured out how to rotate your sticky and make it go in all different directions. This is great. So as you can imagine, we have a lot of fun with these during our we use Jamboards in lots of different ways around brainstorming ideas. What's nice is that we're able to save these. So much like those of you who have attended in-person trainings, you might, by the end of the training, there are all these, large pieces of paper all over the room in which there's information that people can share. And this also provides us another way to be able to do that.
One of the challenges that we have, when the lockdown happened, people were like, well, please, do a training, get it online fast. Well, our training manual is about 275 pages worth of activities and instructions for trainers. And we had to figure out which things would translate. And part of this has been experimentation, seeing what works and what doesn't, and figuring out where we need to add more time. For example, one of the things that happens naturally when you meet in an in-person training is you have side conversations with the person next to you. You're in more small groups. You might chit chat over a break or sit next to somebody at lunch, may even room with somebody. Imagine that. Hard to imagine the time when we used to have people sharing hotel rooms and dorm space. But there were opportunities for community building and bonding with the group. And one of the things that we found by doing the online training is that people really missed those opportunities. So one of the changes that we're making between the August cohorts that we led and starting in January is we will be more intentional about creating opportunities for community building. And this is important not only so that people feel supported by each other during the training period, but also so that after the training ends, they will recognize some people on the email lists and they can turn to each other for problem solving or just sharing. Another thing that is different between the in-person trainings and the online trainings, as you may be aware, the in-person trainings generally start Friday afternoon. And sometime they get done usually around 8 o'clock, 8:30 on Friday. Saturday is an enormously long day from sort of 9 in the morning to about 9:30 at night. By the time folks get done planning their peer facilitation activity. And then on Sunday, they're at it until 3-ish o'clock in the afternoon, 2:33 in the afternoon. So it is a very intense, condensed learning opportunity. For some people, that works great. For other people, physically, it's very demanding for them. And mentally, it's demanding and intellectually, it's demanding because so much information is getting, thrown at you for 3 days. The online trainings are not 3 days on Zoom. It's roughly the same number of hours with the trainers and with the material, but it spans 3 weeks. So when you're talking, either considering yourself attending or you're talking to people about attending, make sure that they understand that's Monday and Thursday evenings for 3 weeks, plus a Saturday. And the Saturday is 2 hours in the morning, then there's a 1 hour lunch, and then there's a couple hours in the afternoon. So it's a huge, huge time commitment, but it's spread over 3 weeks. And in between, before the first synchronous session, when they meet with us, with the trainers, they have some homework to do. So they'll be they'll be filling out some paperwork, some registration. They'll be learning a little bit about the learning program. They're also going to be watching the Racial Justice in Our Whole Lives webinar and writing a reflective brief reflection based on how that sat with them and how they might be able to use anti-racist messages as they're running their OLV program. So that's different. There's also a cost difference. Online training, the current pricing is $175, as opposed to, the UUA and the UCC don't manage the cost of independently run trainings, but They're generally 325 to 400, depending on where they are hosted and how many meals they include and whether they include any kind of lodging. So there's a significant cost savings, but a trade-off is that the trainers are not able to assess participants in quite the same way we would in an in-person training. We're not having casual conversations with them. We are not watching them interact with each other. Now, Marshall can attest, most people successfully complete Our Whole Lives training in person, but sometimes they don't. And when they don't, or when we pass them provisionally, it's because we have some concerns about their ability either to be comfortable with the material, to manage their own history. Sometimes it's a trauma history, to manage their time, to work well with others. These are all things that we can assess in person far more easily than we can online. This means that anyone sending people to an online training has a greater responsibility for making sure that they're making good choices prior to sending them to training. So a difference between in-person and online is that everyone who takes an online training is approved. Well, if they succeed, let's say they don't drop out, and let's say they complete the program successfully, they are still only approved provisionally. This is because we want the individual churches and congregations to take the responsibility for supervising that person for at least one running of their in-person OWL program whenever they're able to start it. And then let us know, hey, this person did great. We have no concerns. Please change them from provisional status to fully approved status. And we'll be happy to do that for you. Why does this matter? Well, it matters because if somebody goes to a congregation or a church other than your own, the next church or next congregation can call us, check to see whether this person has been successfully approved, and we can give them an accurate statement about where they stand on that. So those are some of the differences, and Marshall mentioned some other differences in terms of content as well. So Marshall, how about if you talk about the different types of people who might be suited to this kind of programming?
Sure. Yeah. And I realized I was having so much fun reading the responses to the Jamboard that I didn't share that screen, which I will do right now for the benefit of our all the folks who are watching this as a recording, so you can see the fun that all of us have had logging into this. And I see ones are still being added and moved around. And again, I know a lot of you are familiar with Jamboard. If you're not, you can just Google Jamboard and start creating your own. This, of course, I'm coming across as though I'm advertising Jamboard, which I'm not. I'm only using it as just sort of an example of the many ways in which it is possible to engage and all to be able to learn together beyond what we're able to see and do through Zoom. So we'll give you another moment to.
Oh, Marshall, can I say one of the things that
Sure.
we learned while we're doing the training is that certain devices work better than others. For example, somebody with Chrome had difficulty using the Zoom whiteboard. So that's why we came to favor Jamboard. Marshall, weren't there was it phones or so? There was something else, some other device that didn't work too well, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's part of our process of just sort of figuring out what types of things work for everybody in the training. But we have found we're able to onboard just about everybody to make sure everyone's included, no matter what technology that they're using. So yeah, let's just talk for a moment. Different types of trainings appeal to different people, and Melanie, I certainly want to recognize, and she's already mentioned this in terms of just the joy of being able to get together for a weekend and all to be able to learn from each other. And some people like the idea of sort of traveling and having a really intense weekend. And I think there is a value to that. And that's part of the reason, we're humans, we like connecting with each other in person. But I also think it's possible, so much of what's been talked about with online learning and how you hear it talked about in the news in terms of the experience of elementary, middle school, and even to some extent high school students, is all about the losses, like the things they're missing out by not being in person. And it's worth recognizing that for this format, some people find that it just works really well for them, that it actually it helps facilitate their learning. And we saw that in our evaluation forms, and that people recognize some of the losses, but also some of the benefits as well. One of the biggest ones, of course, is just the travel time, in that for many people, particularly for those of you with congregations in rural areas where attending the nearest training may be a combination of a drive to the nearest airport and then a flight, taking all that travel time and putting it into learning time can be helpful. And also people with schedules or other commitments where they feel like they can't give up a weekend, having that regularly scheduled time where there's no commute and they just have to be in front of their computers or their device at 6 p.m. and a little bit on a Saturday can work well as well. We also found it interesting in terms of some aspects of the training that seem particularly well suited to this. So many of you who have been trained as facilitators are familiar with the journey exercise, which is really an opportunity for participants to reflect back on memories of the messages and experiences that they had around sexuality growing up. And this can be really powerful and a really helpful part of the training, but also one that can be emotionally complex, can bring up memories, including for people who are trauma survivors. It can be a difficult process to work through, and one that can be helpful to have support around. One of the things we're finding with the online format of this is really giving the opportunity for people to be able to do this on their own time in their own home. And on the UU Institute site, I mentioned that some of the content we present through videos, and that is the case for this journey exercise, which is actually broken up into two pieces. The first part is Amy Johnson introducing the journey, much in the same way it would be done in in-person training, but really preparing people for what may come up for them and how to prepare for that and what steps they might want to take. And then the journey itself. And we found with participants, that can be just really helpful to feel like this isn't coming as a surprise to me. This isn't happening in a space where I feel like I'm sort of vulnerable with other people around and are able to listen to it on my own time. And then the next step is a reflection process where participants send us email reflections as trainers, which also enables us to do a little bit more in-depth support and response to their reflection that we otherwise wouldn't have in person. So it works fine in person. We obviously have been doing it for 20 years that way and have gotten lots of positive feedback for that process. But I just put that out there as an example of one of the ways in which the online format some people like even better than the in-person format.
Thank you, Marshall. And that reflection, as Marshall indicated, that one and the reflection that they write in response to the racial justice in our whole lives, those get sent directly to the trainer. They're not shared with other participants. There is some discussion during the live session about the process. How did that process, was that for you? But the actual answers that people come up with remain their own. Between them and the trainers. And so there can be more freedom to say, any of the challenges that they might have. And then the trainers can, of course, offer support, as Marshall said. So one of the things that we decided early on was to limit the size of each group, or we call them a cohort rather than a class. Now, when we do an in-person training, they often, sometimes they're as small as 10, but often they're as big as 21 participants. What we decided to do was to limit the size of each online cohort to 14, which, it means that there are fewer opportunities to send people, but the decision was made because due to the distance created by being virtual, we wanted to be able to see how people respond. How, are they fully engaged? Are they fallen asleep? Are they obviously uncomfortable? Are they dissociating by just turning off their camera, or, you know, doing whatever they are doing elsewhere? What's their attendance like? We can't really see people's faces when they're this small. So by having 14 people, we can actually see everybody with a reasonable size on screen at the same time, including the trainers, and they can also see each other, which is important, again, for that community building and discussion that can take place. Now, one of Amy's missions in her role at the UCC is to grow UCC use of Our Whole Lives. So we are being very intentional about splitting those slots equally among UCC and UU participants. So that means in each of our 2 trainings in January, 2 in March, there will be 28 people in January and 28 people in March, but only half of those will be UU each time. Now, if for whatever reason, I can't fill all the UU slots and Amy's got more people she can add on her waiting list, then we're going to let that happen, or vice versa, right? If Amy can't fill all the UCC spots, there will be more room for UU folks. Because we have to limit that, we are requesting 2 things. One is we're going to require that folks who register facilitators already have at least one person in their congregation or church who is trained and who can supervise them. Now, sometimes there's a little more leeway for UCC folks because Amy will be offering them more support if they're just getting started in OWL and have never done it before. But ideally, folks will have at least one person who's a trained facilitator at the same level who can supervise the person who's trained online. The other thing is that we are asking that when folks see the registration open up online, that you lean back if you already have a team ready to go. If you've already got 2 people who can run your program, please do not register anybody right away. There will continue to be more online trainings as we ramp up and train more people like Marsha and Thea and Hudson to do the trainings. But for right now, we'd really like to help those congregations who are struggling because they only have one facilitator and they can't operate their program that way. We know this can be disappointing and frustrating. And as we get more, we're having an open house sort of in November for trainers to hopefully bring more of them on board. As we get a bigger roster of people willing to work online, then we will be able to offer maybe more than 2 trainings a month, or maybe every month instead of every other month. So we are working as hard as we can to get as many people onboarded as possible. We just can't make any promises at this time. Marshall, maybe you can talk a bit about attendance and commitment right now.
Great, yeah, and I see some excellent questions coming in, and we'll answer those in a moment. But Melanie shared with you the schedule earlier, and it appeared in the chat, and we'll also, get that out to you in other formats. But for anyone who's considering attending one of those trainings in January, or who is going to share this information with other people who may be interested, we just really ask people to look at that schedule and think through, can they commit to every single date that's on there? We recognize, in life, things comes up, there are family emergencies, it is possible that someone may need to miss one unexpectedly. And certainly we're able to work with trainees if that were to happen. But the initial commitment, looking at that schedule, should be like, yes, like I am on board for all this. And part, a couple sort of reasons behind that. One, as Melanie just said, these slots are really limited. So we want for people who are going to be in the room to actually fully be able to and be able to engage. And we have had the experience in the pilot tests of some people realizing that it was just too much of a commitment to take on, need to sort of drop out halfway through, which is disappointing because, of course, that's a slot that could have been used for somebody who actually could have gotten all the way through the process and been able to, continue and be able to teach the program as a result of being able to do that. So we can't emphasize enough. Really look forward to people fully engaging with those dates and making that commitment, and also recognizing that it is not just as simple as being like, okay, I'm available from 6 to 8:30 on these particular dates. But there, as we've said, there's an asynchronous component, which is an important and really relevant part of the training. It's not, many of us have, growing up have had, gone to school where there's school and then there's homework, and the homework is sort of, redundant or just emphasizes themes that you've already learned. Or in this case, it's like, no, we're actually using two different formats, figuring out what content is best for each format. And the content that's being taught asynchronously is just as important. And we'll cover in depth some topics that we're not going to go into depth in person on Zoom. So for people signing up for this, you're also making a commitment to do that work in both in advance of the training and in between the sessions that will involve a time commitment there. This is not to scare or intimidate anyone. This information is engaging our whole lives. As a lot of people, just like in-person trainings, people enjoy learning about this and engaging with the material. And once they're in terms of learning about it. But we also realize people have busy lives, which is why it's important to make sure that you're able to make that time commitment.
Thank you. Yeah, because it's really sad if somebody drops it. We do have a waiting list, or we did in August. And so when people dropped out, like a week in advance, we were able to fill that slot. But when somebody dropped out the day the class started, we couldn't fill that spot. So really, looking at that carefully is important. I think what we're going to do is start answering some questions that were in the question box. So let's go through these. A question unrelated to the online training, but yes, the UCC and the UUA are agreed that we are lowering the minimum age for OWL facilitators attending trainings to 21. So there aren't limitations as to who, what grade level they participate at, but they should be at least 4 years older than the oldest participant in the class. So if you have, people who start the program at 18 and then they turn 19 in that high school cohort, keep that in mind. But 21, we have lowered it, yes. There was a question from Samaya, who's one of our trainers, about whether trainers have to do the follow-up. No, that responsibility will be taken on by the folks in each church and congregation to follow up with us. So once the trainings are done, the trainers are also done. Yeah.
I can jump in, Melanie. The question, with all the accessibility and breakout rooms in Zoom, why are the cohorts so limited in terms of number of participants? I think Melanie touched on this a little bit, but again, it's for our process of trainers to really feel like we're being able to connect with each person and being able to see them on the screen, and for large group discussions for people to be able to see with each other. Our whole lives is fundamentally a small group program, right? We limit the number of people who are, number of participants in the actual, age groups, say middle schoolers in a group. Similar thing, our process is very hands-on and workshoppy, which doesn't allow for us to fill a Zoom with 100 people as much as we might love to do that if there were a way to.
Yeah. So there was a question about, for people who just starting an OWL program in your congregation. So what I would recommend is on the facilitators resources page at uua.org, you go to the OWL page and then click on facilitator resources. There is a webinar that you can find about like introducing our whole lives to DREs for the first time. For religious educators for the first time. And I would highly recommend that you watch that. And that kind of takes you through the steps of how to get started. Otherwise, you're welcome to call me. Even if you're already UCC Church or Amy's on sabbatical, you can contact me. But you don't just plan a program, right? You don't just offer OWL. You do want to make sure that your congregation or your church community is ready for it and prepared for it and to fully support it. So there's sort of some steps to go through for that. So rather than go through all of those here, if you watch that webinar, then contact me or Amy and we can answer the rest of your questions and walk you through the process. Okay, someone took the April training. That was Alice. No, Alice, you're still provisional. Everybody's provisional until they have actually run an hour program in person with teenagers or middle school youth. And then your congregation gets back to us to let us know that you did a great job and you need to be changed from provisional to fully approved. Yes, Marshall, would you like to answer the next one?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. Can you expand on some of the device issues so we're ready with local tech help? Yes, that's great. I mean, I think first of all, many your congregations are already doing some sort of Zoom format for your services. If you're not already doing that, or you're not sort of have everybody on board on the Zoom, that's a good starting point, including making sure that they're able to use breakout rooms. Melanie and I were sort of trying to remember in passing what some of the tech issues that we had. One was we had tried using the Zoom whiteboard, and that's limited in terms of what devices you can use that on. So that's part of the reason why we switched over from Zoom whiteboard to Jamboard. And in general, making sure people have functioning cameras and microphones, and if possible, laptops and desktops are going to work better for people to engage than phones. In particular, have limited Zoom capacity for being able to see multiple participants and things like that at once. But otherwise, you shouldn't. Other than those sort of very basic tech things, there aren't too many bells and whistles in part to make this as accessible to as many people as possible. So, for instance, the UU Institute is just a website. We're not expecting you to download an app or learn an entirely new platform. And that's really the goal. And if anything, some of the slightly more complicated issues are on the trainer end of things, but that's no problem. That's sort of our job to figure out. But we try to make it really easy for the participants.
Yeah, the UU Institute, it's like, read this, click on this to start the video. And then underneath, post a comment. They just type the comment. That's as complicated as it gets. So let's see. There was a question about how do we come up training. The trainer, we're not actually needing to create new trainers at the moment. We have a lot of trainers. We have about 120 or so trainers. What we're looking to do is to take the trainers we already have and help them add to their skill set, so that they can also train online. That's the most efficient thing to do, because actually creating a training of trainers takes quite some time. And that is not something that we would do online. But thank you for the questions.
There's a
Marshall?
question. Yeah, sorry if I missed this. What levels are you training for? Only 7 to 9, 10, 12? So yes, these trainings that are coming up in the spring, starting in January, are for 7, 9, 10, 12 combined. However, our goal, the work has been assigned to create elementary and adult level trainings. So that'll be a project for the spring that hopefully will go live. When are you thinking, Melanie? Like August or September?
By August we'll have those done. It should go faster. If we can do it faster, we'll do it faster. And because we have now the process in order for the 7 to 9, 10, 12 level, things should go a little faster as we develop the other ones. I think I answered the question about training trainers. What is the training registration deadline? There isn't a deadline, so to speak, but we haven't even added it to the calendar yet. Amy asked that we wait to post anything on the calendar until she was back from sabbatical, so that as UCC people had questions, she could answer them promptly, rather than having those questions sit on her desk while she was unable to answer them. So early November, we'll put things up, and I can only say, it's not like there's a the deadline will be a couple of weeks before the training actually begins. But I would say that given the interest in online training, it would behoove folks to start looking at their people in their congregation who they might want to have trained, have them check their calendars, have them pencil in the dates so that nothing interferes. And then as soon as the registration opens, apply. I hate to create an atmosphere of scarcity. That's not a healthy thing to do, but that's all I can say is that I think that the demand will be high. And so if you check the dates with folks in advance, make sure that you have $175 to pay for their training. Plus they'll need also a copy of the curriculum. Then you'll be good to go. What is the expected workload or number of hours for the asynchronous learning? Marshall, do you remember what that number was?
I mean, I think it varies based. So this is the asynchronous piece, right? We're talking about an addition. I think it varies based on, some people are sort of faster readers, and we're still sort of working on exactly. We're revising a few things in terms of what videos we're expecting people to watch. But I think we were roughly looking about 2 hours per session in addition.
Yeah. There's
Sound
there's
about
a
right?
little more. It's a little more weighted so over the weekend, so that between the
Mhm.
Thursday and the Monday, there's a little bit more work that they do on their own time during that longer span of time. And yeah, I think in advance, maybe the webinar is about an hour. Then they have the reflection, and there's a couple other smaller things that they like, introducing themselves in the comment box, something that doesn't take very long. But yeah, there is a commitment, and it's, if somebody's life gets too busy and they can't write a reflection the night it's due, that's okay. They can make it up. But all of the work needs to be done, relatively, like hopefully within the week that it's assigned. And
we also have peer facilitation assignments. So many of you have been through the training and familiar with that process. It's an opportunity for people to actually practice facilitating parts of the curriculum. And we've chosen ones carefully that are a good match for Zoom. But there is some, as with anything, when you're the one presenting, there is a little bit of advanced prep for that. But it's not a huge amount of work.
Yeah, and that happens on the Saturday. That's why it's so important that folks not miss that final Saturday. That's the day that people actually get to put into practice the facilitation skills that they have been learning about the whole time. So Carla has a question about whether somebody needs to be a member of a congregation or a church to be a facilitator. That is absolutely up to each individual congregation and church. Periodically, I get queries for congregations seeking facilitators. So they're clearly open to having somebody who's not a member of their congregation. I always suggest that they offer some kind of remuneration in consideration of the time that somebody would be putting in for that. But that's not something that the UUA or the UCC get involved with. I would recommend, just as we do with any facilitators or anyone working with youth, that you conduct a background check on whoever you have working with your program. All right, what's the next question? Are there protocols for teaching OWL in a school that differ from in a religious institution? Generally the same. You'd want to have your orientation to your school board or your director of curriculum, make sure that you have support there, just like a congregation would get buy-in from their community. Your policy on parents having an orientation, we certainly would recommend a parent orientation or caregiver orientation, but your individual school might have sort of an opt-in, opt-out with or without, that's totally the way that you do it. Schools often do not run OWL in its entirety. They often don't have time for 90-minute segments. When they are unable to use it as written, we do ask that they not call it OWL, that they just say they're offering a health education or sexuality education that uses some OWL materials to adapt it to their own setting. But there are schools that use the whole thing. There's a private school in New York that's using it. There are other ones across the country. So it can be done. You're welcome to contact me. There's also a group online on Facebook called OWL, just OWL, in schools. And OWL trainer Anil Ullman moderates that group. So you might want to check in with that group and get some feedback on how it's working in schools. Again, that's OWL in schools on Facebook. Let's see. You want to take the next one, Marshall, about joining Zoom together?
Sure. Did we answer where do we find the webinars to train in other age groups? So again, if you're looking to be trained for elementary or adult, that will be available in August.
Yeah.
You mentioned the OWL online videos coming out soon to be utilized by parents with their kids. When should we expect these to be coming out?
Well, we're hoping actually before December. So Marshall and Dorian created the videos, and we have a wonderful person at the UUA who is editing the ending credits and the starting slides. So that production will take a little bit of time, but definitely before December, those should be ready. And Marshall, maybe you can talk a little bit about what's on those.
Sure. Yeah, we're really excited about those because, I mean, it's always been a theme of OWL that the parents are the primary sexuality educators of their children. And that is particularly true with this kindergarten and first grade age group. So the real opportunity in the videos is to take some of the same content. I mentioned that Dorian and I are the co-authors of the revised K-1 curriculum. So to take some of the same content that we were putting into the curriculum and create videos that parents could use at home, which seemed really like a great match in terms of the pandemic, realizing that they could cover much of the same content that we would cover in an in-person Our Whole Lives session with their children individually, including really empowering and supporting parents in terms of how to talk to young children about sexuality-related questions that come up or issues that may come up. And one of my favorite parts of these video series is recommending some really great books. We took hundreds of books out of the library and purchased copies of ones that we couldn't find in the library. There has been an explosion of books in the last 5 years or so on a lot of the topics that OWL talks about, such as gender identity and bodies, and doing so in ways that are really affirming and inclusive around different types of identities and diversity. So we sorted through these books, found the very best ones, and introduced them as part of the video series. So there's a real opportunity there for parents and also for educators to see these videos and use them in different contexts that can be helpful. So there was, okay, if two people from the same congregation are being trained, would it be prudent for them to join the Zoom calls together? I'm interested in sort of Melanie's thoughts on this too, but in general.
It wouldn't work because we might randomize people in breakout rooms. And so they'd be having two different conversations on one device. Wouldn't work. And also we would want them to be able to do their own Jamboard answers. And so they could be in the same space, that would be fine. Or actually that might not be fine because there might be echoes. Yeah, the echoes wouldn't work. So yeah, do different spaces or different offices within the same building would work. But definitely they need their own devices.
Yeah, and just to add on that, if you're talking about the same session, well, great. Like if you're both being trained, each of you in your own homes or in different offices in your church, like that's fine. Joining that Zoom call together. Although I guess even there, I would just add sort of being sensitive to what Melanie was saying about allowing opportunities for as many congregations to sign up as possible, and that think through, is it really important to have both of these people trained at exactly this moment? But certainly if they are going to be being in the same room is fine. I mean, not the same room, you know what I mean, the same Zoom.
Yeah. So there's a question about if you took training 10 years ago and have never led it, what we generally suggest is that if you've never led a program and a bunch of years have passed by, that you do take another training. I would suggest that in the meantime, reserve the first couple of months of trainings for people who have never been trained. And in the interim, there are webinars. There's a webinar that came out when the second edition of 7 to 9 was introduced. I think that was December of 2014 was the date on that webinar. And you can watch that and get some updates. There's also, everybody should know that on the facilitators resources page that I believe Andrea can link in the chat, there is what we call sort of an addendum or recommended updates to the 7 to 9 curriculum. There's also one for the adult curriculum. We are using that. That's part of the homework for the online trainings, actually downloading those recommended updates and marking up the book so that those new YouTube links are in there, new wording about bodies and orientation and gender are in their book. So, if you haven't ever led a program, you definitely want to update your understanding of gender and whatnot. So make sure that you avail yourself of that. And everybody else, if you haven't already downloaded that document or sent it to your facilitators, please do that. Let's see, what's the next question?
I'll just
K1 curriculum. Did you want to answer that one?
Yeah, well, let me just jump in first. There's a discussion in the chat about the dates that, just for folks who are watching the recording of this, and that we recognize our dates are a little bit off in terms of the calendar that was shared. So we're looking at Mondays and Thursdays in.
Oh, did I get the wrong date? Sorry.
So
yeah, Mondays and Thursdays. It starts the second week of the month, Mondays and Thursdays, plus that final Saturday that's after the last Thursday. We'll fix the dates. When it's on the calendar, the dates will be correct. The K1 curriculum is being field tested right now. Amy is running that. So when she gets back from sabbatical, we'll be collecting all the feedback. If any of you are participating in that test, make sure to get in your surveys for every workshop so that we have your feedback. And then we enter into a process of developmental editing. And I have to say, sometimes that takes a long time. But Marshall and Dorian did so much preliminary work. They had sensitivity readers. They found all the wonderful resources. They did, almost a field test before they gave us the manuscript. So I have a lot of confidence in this curriculum, and I think the developmental editing will go a little faster than it normally does. Once that process is done, and it takes a couple months even with a good curriculum, then it takes 6 months once it's in the publications department's hands to actually typeset it all. It's not called typesetting anymore, I don't think, just formatting it all, proofreading it, copy editing it, and then printing it. It'll definitely, there is a time that it will take to get done, but it'll definitely be ready for next fall. Will registration be first come, first serve, or are there application questions? There are application, it's a combination. So we certainly keep the applications in date order, but we do want to make sure, Amy's going to be looking at the UCC side. As I said, there are some variations or some differences in how we're accepting people to participate. But for my side, I'm going to be looking to make sure folks don't already have 10 people on a team, on their OWL team. So they're going to have to say, this is the person that's at my congregation who will be supervising me and co-facilitating with me. And the DRE is going to have to also agree that they will be supervising that pair and overseeing their work together. And they will be the person who gets back to me at the end of the first successful run, or the first actual live implementation of an entire program, not just one workshop, but the entire Our Whole Lives program, however many months that runs for you. And then the DRE takes responsibility for that, and also takes responsibility for making every effort to select somebody who can attend all the workshops. So yes, it's a process. It's not necessarily automatic, like you get your thing in at midnight on the first day, you're automatically in. But we're going to try to respect those people who qualify, given the recommendations that we've set, and who get their I'm not starting to take names already. Let's put it that way. That will have to wait. Okay, what's the next question?
I'll just jump ahead to say there's a question. Would you recommend that folks who are already certified facilitators but are looking for a refresh wait a few cycles before applying for the online training? Yes, we would recommend that. Again, just dealing with the backlog of trying to get people up and running. All of us who are trainers love attending training ourselves, definitely see the appeal of getting that refresh, but holding off for a while would be helpful in terms of being able to get other people trained.
Yeah, so somebody's asking about a guideline for mixing facilitators across levels. We do not recommend that. Now, the UCC and the UA both have church and congregational polity. So you ultimately get to make the decisions of what you do in your organization. But, little kids have very different ways of learning and of behaving. Very different ways of developing as they grow socially and as they develop sexually. So the curriculum for the young kids is different and the training is slightly different to accommodate that. So we don't recommend that if you've got somebody trained for grades 7 to 9 that they automatically teach the younger kids. But again, that decision is up to you. We can't control that. Marshall, you've trained at every level. What input would you have?
Yeah, similar thing. I mean, what Melanie said in terms of just recognizing that this, doing one thing well doesn't necessarily give you the skills and the tools that you need for something else well, but also recognizing people's desire to have these, we've missed a year with COVID and are trying to sort of figure out how to make this happen. So if it's an interesting combination of judgment. In an ideal world, every single person who was training at a particular level was fully up and running with that. And also realizing that if it's between that and not having any, not being able to do K1 at all, then that may be one of the trade-offs that you'd have to make.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it with two people who have never been trained at that level for sure. There's two similar questions about, can I be notified about when the calendar opens? Can I be known about online training? You know what? The OWL staff at the UUA is me. The OWL staff at the UCC is Amy. And we just don't have the resources to contact people individually. So just keep checking that calendar. And it's a good thing to check the calendar anyway, because people on and off on kind of a random basis are adding in-person trainings as well. I'm not sure exactly when the online trainings will go on the calendar because I'm respecting Amy's time off. And when she gets back, we will be finalizing, the dates are set, but we need to finalize some other arrangements like with the registration forms and whatnot. So it will be early in November. So just keep checking that calendar. Yes, there will be a limit of maximum of 2 people per congregation for attending the trainings. What's the next question? What's the next question?
Sorry if I missed. Do we answer this? Will there be a limit to the number of trainees per congregation? Two. Great.
Yeah. If you have trained facilitators, but their kids will be in the next class, will we still be considered for trainings? I don't know. That honestly hadn't crossed my mind. I would encourage you to allow congregations that can't have any program at all to take precedence, but I don't know. I'll have to give that some thought about, if you already have 2 trained folks, but they don't want to, they shouldn't be training their own kids. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that question right now. I have to give it a little bit of thought. Other questions?
There's some discussion in the chat about the document that is the recommended updates to the 7 to 9 curriculum.
Yes.
And let me just screen share I will screen share that document for the sake of the folks who are watching this as a recording.
We only have a couple seconds left, so we need to.
Okay, great. This is what it looks like. So find that document and update your curriculum if you are watching that, and we'll put that in the resources for this webinar when it's posted.
Thanks, everybody, for participating. We have to scoot off because the UCC has another meeting coming into the Zoom space. You're welcome to reach me at mjdavis@uua.org. If you can't remember that, just write to owl@uua.org. Don't jam Amy's email box because she's not there to answer it. Thanks for being here, Marshall and Andrea. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for taking the time.